The final part of the story of the great buffalo hunts like Head Smashed In and others is the part of the butchering, the processing of the carcasses after the killing was over. And that was a huge event and a huge amount of time and a great number of people involved in that. We tend to give all the glory and the most attention to the actual cliff and the killing of the animals because it's so dramatic. That's certainly the high point of the classic image of a buffalo jump is this pouring of animals over the cliff, swarming of people onto these mounds of carcasses and killing them. Certainly nothing matches the adrenaline of that moment. But really the greatest amount of work probably still lay ahead, and that is that you've got to take this enormous mound of carcasses now and make something useful out of this. Otherwise, the whole effort was really just in vain. And that's the part we now call the butchering, the processing of the carcasses. And it went on for days after any buffalo jump or buffalo pound was over. It probably happened in a number of different locations. We think the initial butchering of the carcasses probably happened right at the jump, such as here at Head Smashed In, where they would start to cut these animals open, spill out the stomach contents, drain the blood, get some of the weight off these animals, and cut them into manageable sized pieces that people could actually begin to deal with. The bison is a huge animal. Males and females weigh hundreds of kilograms. It's impossible for any one person to just carry these around. So they would cut them into sized pieces that could be managed, legs, backs, cut the head off, cut the backbone into separate sections, make the ribs into separate sections, and so on. And once they had them probably divvied into sized pieces that people could easily handle, we think they left this kill area at the Head Smashed In and dragged them down below onto what we call the butchering or the processing area. This is a great extensive flat land. It would make a beautiful area for camps of people to stay for days at a time and to then be able to spread out and work on the carcasses there and to work them down into more manageable size, and more importantly, to work these into parts of the carcass that can be preserved and used for many months following a buffalo kill. I think that's one of the most important things in terms of the purpose of the great buffalo jumps and the pounds, was that they provided a supply of food, including meat and fat, for many, many months after these kill events were over. But it all depended on being able to properly process this. If you didn't do that properly, your meat would spoil within a matter of days or weeks, and really the enormous effort you'd gone through to get these animals here was largely wasted. So an enormous amount of time was spent reducing this food into types of products that could be stored and consumed for many months after. Probably the most important were dried meat, and dried meat that was further made into then what's called pemmican. And the drying of meat was extremely important, and that was done by simply cutting meat in very thin slices off of the major parts of the carcass, the legs, the ribs, the neck, and so on. And these would be hung on wooden racks that we think they set up down below on that butchering site. And they'd hang these things on wooden racks, and the sun, the wind, the heat, the lack of humidity here would dry this meat out very quickly. They may also have built small fires under these racks and used smoke to help dry the meat. And smoke also imparts a preservative agent in the meat, as we know today when we smoke various products, to help them not only taste good, but also help preserve them. Once you've reduced the water out of the meat by drying it, you've taken an enormous amount of the weight out. About 60% of the weight of meat from a buffalo is just sheer water. So you've taken a great deal of weight that people have to carry and removed that by drying the meat. So that's one important step for them. And now that meat is dry, just like we eat and keep beef jerky around for many months, same can be done with dried meat, simply from the butchering of the buffalo and the drying of it on these racks. But another further type of food they made was called pemmican. And this is where they took the dried meat and they pounded it up with stone hammers into tiny little flecks, almost like a powder. And then they would mix that with fat, which they got from the animal, usually from the bones, the marrow or the grease from the bones. And they would mix this all together in a mass, and then usually add berries as a way of improving the taste. Saskatoons and choke cherries were probably the favorite in this part of the country. Adding berries, again, dramatically, in my opinion, improves the taste of pemmican. But again, it also has an important preservative quality in that berries have tannic acid in them, which are basic tannins, which are, of course, are used in tanning today, and that's a preservation process. So you're actually helping preserve the meat by mixing berries into it, as well as the fat in the meat powder. And once that was done, it was pounded into these hide bags and pounded in really tight to drive out all the air they possibly could. And then the bags were stuffed closed, and we even have records of people jumping on them to expel all the air from the bags to make sure that you got all that out. Because the more air you get out from the meat and the fat. Air, of course, contains microbes and possible bacteria, so the more that you get out of there, the longer these products will last. And then sometimes they even sold the packages closed because they were intending to keep these for many months. And these were packages of pemmican that then they would haul around with them for months to come.